Okay, good evening, councillors, and welcome to this meeting of the Strategic Scrutiny Committee, which is being undertaken virtually in accordance with the recently enacted government regulations during the current coronavirus pandemic. Before we start the meeting, can I remind members of the following? And I believe, Councillor Newby, your microphone is still on. Unfortunately, we're going to ask you to mute your microphones whilst you're not speaking. It asks me to say, please remain focused on the topic being discussed, which I think goes without saying. Please try to avoid repeating points which have already been made. Avoid interrupting other councillors and respect the position of the chair. But we've never had any issues in the past, so I'm sure we'll be fine. Please remember this meeting is still being broadcast in the normal way via Facebook Live. And it's important, therefore, that members are aware that the public can hear what is being said and decided, and that the public can see all of us councillors as well. Therefore, try not to be distracted by anything in the background. I know Councillor Lyons has her cat with her, but I'm sure it's very well trained. So, with all these matters in mind, can I ask Mark Devin from Democratic Services to do a roll call, please, of all councillors and officers, so we can see who's here.
Thank you, Chair. Could you please, councillors, please state if you're present when I call your name, please. So, Councillor Sills?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Newby?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson?
Present.
Thank you. So we still haven't had Councillor Branston. Councillor Buswell, please.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Henson?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Lyons?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Diana Moore?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Jemima Moore?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Owen?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson?
Present.
Thank you. We are, that is quorum, Chair. If may, I was going to do officers roll call as well. So to start with Director Joe Yelland.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. City Solicitor Barn Al-Kafaji.
Present.
Thank you. Chief Finance Officer Dave Hodgson.
Present.
Thank you. Corporate Manager Democratic Civic Support John Street.
Present.
Thank you. And we have also myself, Sharon Sissons and Howard Bassett as Democratic Services Officers in attendance. And just to finalise, Chair, we also have Councillors Kevin Mitchell, Michael Mitchell, Ollie Pearson, Duncan Wood and Phil Bialik in attendance as well.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Mark. Thank you, members. The first item on the agenda is apologies, as always. So can I ask Mark or Sharon from Democratic Services to state whether we have any apologies this evening?
I'll just advise the apologies. It's Sharon here. So it's Councillor Lamb, Packham and Hannaford. We've received apologies from Chair.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Okay, the next item of business are to sign some rather historic minutes, I would suggest, of the Strategic Scrutiny Committee. Obviously, we're in unprecedented times, so can members please approve or not approve minutes from the 16th of January 2020? And I believe Mark is going to do a roll call. Mark, would you like to do the two sets of minutes separately, I presume?
Yes, I'll do two separate roll calls, Chair.
Excellent. So over to you for the 16th of January.
Thank you, Chair. This is calling the names of the members who were in attendance at the meeting on the 16th of January to approve the minutes. So if I start with Councillor Atkinson.
Yeah, approved.
Thank you. Councillor Buswell.
Approved.
Thank you. Councillor Lyons.
Approved.
Thank you. Councillor Diana Moore.
Approved.
Thank you. Councillor Newby.
Approved.
Thank you. Councillor Owen.
Approved.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Approved.
Thank you. And Councillor Sills.
Approved.
Thank you. So that's the minutes of the meeting of the 16th of January have been approved, Chair.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll sign those when I can. Are you going to move on to the 12th of March now, Mark?
I am, yes, Chair. Thank you. So again, this is for the members who were in attendance. So Councillor Atkinson.
Approved.
Thank you. Councillor Lyons.
Approved.
Thank you. Councillor Diana Moore.
Approved.
Thank you. Councillor Jemima Moore.
Approved.
Thank you. And Councillor Patterson.
Approved.
Thank you. And Councillor Sills.
Approved.
So unanimous approval to approve the minutes of the 12th of March, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, members. Again, I'll sign those minutes when I can get into the Civic Centre. So the next item on the agenda is item number 3, declarations of interests. So if any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests that relate to business on the agenda and have not already been included in the register of interests, we ask that members declare them before any discussions take place on them. So we move to the next item, which is item number 4, Local Government Act of 1985, the exclusion of the press and public. This is essentially asking us to make the meeting a private meeting if there are any Part 2 items, and there are no Part 2 items on this agenda. Item 5, questions from the public under Standing Order 19 on COVID-19 matters. We have no public questions received, so we won't be having any Q&As from members of the public today, which means we can move straight on to item number 6, which is a presentation on the coronavirus COVID-19 by portfolio holders and questions from members and answers on COVID-19. So the Scrutiny Programme Board, and this is mainly for context, the Scrutiny Programme Board met on the 4th of June of this year to consider the way forward for scrutiny, and we agreed that the portfolio holders, we felt, should report to each Scrutiny Committee on their respective issues in relation solely to the COVID-19 pandemic. We also agreed that members should be given an opportunity to put forward questions to portfolio holders, and we will see this evening. The list of questions received from members has been circulated to all council members, and for each portfolio, questions from members of the committee are also listed first and then followed by questions from other council members. So who do we have here today? We have Councillor Ollie Pearson as portfolio holder for leisure and physical activity, and Councillor Duncan Wood as portfolio holder for support services and procurement. And they'll be both presenting in their respective briefs alongside officer support from directors Joe Yelland and Barn Al-Kafaji, and they'll both be advising as necessary. So I'm now going to move on to Councillor Pearson to briefly outline the briefing note he's presented to the will be presenting to the committee, and then we will have questions from members. So Councillor Pearson, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Sells. Just to confirm, you can hear me well. Thanks, Councillor Sells. So let's take a look at what's been going on in the work during the COVID-19 pandemic in relation to active and healthy people and leisure. And obviously the first and most significant impact on our leisure service. So as members will know, until very recently, we were in the process of looking to acquire a new and announced we changed tack on this due to the pandemic, and this is a significant change in direction in terms of our procurement of future leisure facilities and the way that we run them going forward. So the key element here really for members to understand is that at the point that the pandemic began, we had organizations interested in bidding for the contract and process of bidding for the contract. But obviously in the context of coronavirus and the impact, the very significant impact on leisure services and the ongoing impact because compared to any other area, leisure is going to be one of the last areas that we can, I think, sensibly reopen certain facilities, and the way forward, the roadmap for that is not yet clear from government. And so that's really affected what we're doing. And it's changed the sort of the matrix of risk, if you like, for how we provide leisure services in the future. And particularly for the very long term, what a really good long-term solution for our leisure provision looks like. And so the leaders announced that we've made the momentous decision to insource the leisure service. And that is the whole leisure service. We are going to run, the council will run the leisure service. The exact details of that are to be finalised and worked out, and there'll be further reports to council and the various bodies of council. But the crucial decision is, and coming forward to the executive and council, that we will re-insource the leisure service for two main reasons. And the first reason is that obviously the current procurement process has ended, because in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, those people who are interested in, organizations that were interested in taking on a contract pulled out of the process. And also when we look forward, looking at the potential for what the next year, 2 years and 3 years look like in terms of the leisure service, in order to minimize the risk and make sure that we have a coherent and good leisure service, we need to take control of it so that as we come to reopening it, we can have that control in making sure that we do the best for the people of Exeter in terms of the leisure service that we provide. And also in the very long term, that we can see real opportunities in insourcing leisure service that allows us to deliver against our the Sport England local delivery pilot, which I'll be talking about in a moment, will be referred to soon as the Let's Move project. And that we can see how the integration of that with a in-source leisure service has a lot of potential to really benefit the people of Exeter over the long term. So we're really excited about this, but it's also a difficult time in terms of the costs associated with it. We've got some difficult choices to make. So that's the leisure contract. If I just turn now to the other elements of the report. So the continuing work on building our new leisure facility in the city centre at St Sidwell's Point. Work has progressed during the coronavirus pandemic. Work has been ongoing, but has obviously been affected by it. While people have, the contractors have been on site for the entire period of the pandemic, observing social distancing, making sure that we're supporting them to maintain social distancing, work safely through the pandemic. We're obviously seeing some delays to the project, and you can see that outlined in the report. We think there will be a delay. We still think that the facility will open next year, and in the summer of next year, we hope. But realistically, at this time, we have to, take all dates and figures with a slight grain of salt, because things are still developing in terms of the pandemic and the response to it, and the supply chains that our contractors rely on to actually deliver the project. And we're doing everything we can to support them, both in St Sidwell's Point, and if you look at the site now, you can start to see the building come together. I think it's really taking shape, and it's really exciting to come down Heavy Tree Road in Exeter and see that magnificent building coming into shape there, which is really great. And the same is true really in terms of the Riverside project and refurbishment. There's been real progress actually on certain elements of risk within the project, particularly the work around the pool, and which was a major concern in terms of potential delays to the project. But obviously we still are assessing the full impacts of coronavirus in the respect to that project as well. On to then future, or I suppose longer in the future, developments that we may see and any effect that coronavirus may have had on those. Well, we have continued to work on the Exeter Arena development plans during this period, and you can see in the report that we've been talking to organisations, and we're really happy that that's progressing, and there's a real future engaging with the current users of the site and the current organisations there. There's a real appetite to see that development, and we're really looking forward to working with both those organisations and Sport England to create a much enhanced and fantastic facility on that site. Moving on to the playing pitches strategy. Obviously, this has been slightly affected in terms of some of our consultation work as well due to COVID-19, but we are planning to bring a comprehensive playing pitch strategy forward. And you can see the details in the report. The final big area that I want to talk about is just the Sport England local delivery pilot and how that has been affected by COVID-19. But really what we've found is it's actually kind of the other way around. So luckily our Sport England local delivery pilot has actually been a big part of supporting the community and the city through the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of the resources that we were putting in place to support the community in terms of activity have been successfully diverted into supporting the community through Exeter community wellbeing during the time of the pandemic, and all the support that they've given to vulnerable people in our community and to the community in general during this time. And that's been a real success, and hopefully you've seen as councillors reports on that during the pandemic. And I think it's a real testament to the resources that have been put in and the skills base that is there that has been able to be diverted into delivering on that work. And obviously, as this new normal that we're moving into emerges from the pandemic, that will affect obviously the nature of the work, or rather the learning of the work that the local delivery pilot takes forward over the next months in the way it delivers against the priorities we've already set out. And again, please do take a look in detail at the report, and members of the public, please do as well, because I think it's one thing we really want to get out there, that this is coming forward. We've been referring it to as the Sport England local delivery pilot for a long time. From now on, and particularly from September on, we're going to be referring to this as Let's Move, as part of the way that we talk about what we do for physical activity in the city. And Let's Move is going to be a fantastic thing for the city for many years to come. We are working with Sport England and putting in further, looking for further funding up to 2025 to deliver against a range of projects. And the delivery is really starting now. So from July, we're starting to, some of those projects that have been worked on over the last year or so are coming into the delivery phase, even despite the coronavirus pandemic. The final one, which relates to the Sport England delivery pilot, is the Wanford development plan. So this has been really integrated. The idea of improving our facilities at Wanford and both our leisure offer, working out what the community wants for Wanford, and how that can benefit the health and well-being of that community, is really crucial to our Sport England, or was really crucial to our Sport England bid, and why we were successful. And obviously, we were in a consultation phase with that work, and the reality of the coronavirus pandemic has meant a pause on that, because consulting during this period just hasn't been possible for a couple of months. That has changed in the last couple of weeks. So we've been having meetings again, and we're looking at the early stages of the second phase of consultation with care consultants, the sounding board that we've set up, looking to bring forward the next phase of consultation, to make sure that groups that currently use the facilities there are engaged, and to take all that forward so that we can come to a position where we have really exciting development ideas and development proposals for Wanford that really reflect what the community wants and reflect our strategy in terms of sport and physical activity and health and well-being. So that's my report, and we'll move on to any questions if that's possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson, for a really comprehensive report. It seems you've been very busy over the last few months, which is great. Okay, so we have a series of questions which have been sent in already to committee services, which is great. I'm going to start with questions from committee members, and then I'm going to move on to members' questions who are not members of the committee. So I've just like the member who's asking the question, and you can see on the screen now the questions, hopefully. We're going to start with Councillor Jemima Moore. If the councillors, when invited, could read out their question, we will then have a response from the portfolio holder. This is Councillor Pearson, and then there'll be an opportunity for a supplementary question. For members who are members of the committee, I will be offering it out to the floor as such after all questions have been asked that have been sent in. So there will be an opportunity for committee members to raise any points after these questions have been answered. Hopefully that's clear, and hopefully members of the public and councillors can see the questions on the screen. Thank you, Mark, for sharing that. So if I go over to Councillor Jemima Moore for your first question, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Pearson. I think you've actually already answered this question in your report. So the first question was, will the Pools and Leisure Centre at St Sidwell's Point and Riverside be included in the future insourcing of Exeter City Council's leisure services?
The answer to the question is yes, and they're crucial to that insourcing, but they're landmark facilities for the city, and they will be part of a fantastic leisure service that we provide.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
I was wondering if it's the intention that the in-house management will be via a council-owned private company, or will it be fully incorporated into the services of Exeter City Council that we already have?
That is to be determined. I think the best model needs to be worked out in terms of getting best value for Exeter and making sure that both the service runs well, that the employees in the service are looked after really well. But I think initially, given the time frame, it will be necessary to transfer them directly into the council, and it will be run directly by the council in the first instance.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your second question, Councillor Moore.
Thank you. So my second question is, alongside the 2018 draft playing pitch strategy review, will there be a review of other outdoor sports facilities?
So there are no plans to review at a strategic level the Move More Physical Activity strategy and Move More Built Leisure Facilities strategy were just adopted in 2019, and these are guiding the work of officers. Play parks and play areas and green spaces strategy work will be led by Councillor Harvey and is still under development. And obviously there's some delays to that due to the pandemic. On an operational level, obviously, in terms of how things are done, of course it will affect. I think what we've seen is that our outdoor spaces can be more valuable in this pandemic. We've seen their value in perhaps a new light almost, and I don't think there's anything in that strategy that didn't value those outdoor spaces and think that we needed more in some cases. So I think that's baked in to our strategy, and it's how we deliver it.
And do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, so actually I asked the question with the Clifton Hill golf driving range in mind. It's a huge, as you're saying, like our inner city green spaces have become so important to us, and it's important we've got, obviously over the lockdown we saw that we needed large amounts of accessible space for people to be able to socially distance in. So when I'm thinking about the Clifton Hill golf driving range, I know it occupies a huge area of publicly owned inner city space, which could potentially be used more widely. Now, I don't know very much about golf, maybe nothing. And I also know that we've recently lost our other golf course. So it may be that actually that's really well used for golf, but I would be interested to know more about how well used it is, and if actually that space could be used in some other way for the public. I mean, I would like to see it used as an open public space that could be enhanced for biodiversity. So my question is it possible that we could have within that review a review of the golf driving range at Clifton Hill?
Yeah, so we're not planning a review of the strategy, as I said, but obviously you'll have seen, or you know, the decisions that we've made in terms of those spaces. So one of the golf course you mentioned, the Northbrook, we have decided to protect that as a green space, or to use that to make sure that its future use is green space, and consult with the local residents. And equally, on the Clifton Hill site, it's about what the community wants, and we're going to be listening to the community on both those spaces in terms of what they want and the proposals are as it stands. So
am I allowed to ask how we might go?
I think
no, sorry, you're not allowed another question.
Sorry.
Yeah, if I just finish. So can I just finish? Sorry, Councillor Zels.
If you finish,
okay.
yeah, you can finish the response, but I can't take another
position.
question.
Yeah, so the position in terms of the Clifton Hill site is obviously we have a lease with the golf driving range. That position is ongoing. The green space that we've outlined, we've confirmed that will be kept as an open green space. I can't go beyond what has been, what we've previously on this, obviously. But obviously, we all know the importance of those spaces, and that's why we've made those decisions previously on them. But the driving range is obviously still a driving range, and they have a lease on that, so we won't be challenging that at any time in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Over to Councillor I was going to say Demima. That's a mixture of you both. Councillor Diana Moore. My apologies.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm interested in the Sport England local delivery pilot, and I just would like the portfolio holder to expand a little bit more on the second bullet point of the update, which relates to the background bit, and explain the new system and approach and a few key outcomes from the evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pearson, I believe you might want to show some graphics at this point. Is that right?
Yeah, I think there's one crucial. There we go. That's the one. Yeah, great. So there's a that is, yeah. So the graphic we've just put up on the screen there just illustrates what we're talking about when we say a whole system approach in terms of the Sport England delivery pilot, and that basically means bringing together things that you wouldn't necessarily always think of as just relating to health and well-being. So transport and connectivity, our community and culture, our housing, leadership and governance, all those things that make our society work. How do they affect, and how can they be used to improve the health outcomes of particularly those in our community where health outcomes are not as good as in other parts of the city. And our whole system approach, therefore, tries to affect all of those areas, whether it's the workplace, the schools, what we do as a council, all of those areas. So what we're trying to do is not take a narrow view of health outcomes and well-being outcomes as to just being about sport and fitness, to just being about going to the doctors, but how do all these other things affect that? And if I could just give an example, I think in that point in the report, when I've been talking to our officers about the challenges with this, it's about often talking to the right people in schools, in workplaces, making sure that we actually have the right relationships trying things. Sometimes they don't work, and sometimes we need to take a different approach because this is an entirely new approach to dealing with these issues. So I think there's a lot there. I think what we've done is there are 2 documents that I'd like to be included, hopefully included with minutes if they can be, but they'll certainly be sent to the councillors who have asked the questions, in fact, the whole committee, that outline the detail of the plan, what is planned to be delivered, and the kind of the challenges that we're facing and how we're overcoming them. And I think if you take, it's a very detailed question, so I can't really get into, I don't think it'd be very helpful to get into the very minute detail, but our whole system approach is winning hearts and minds, but we need to make sure that we engage with the right people in organizations, and that we engage organizations in a really positive way and bring everyone together to make it work. Obviously, coronavirus has had an impact on us doing that over the last couple of months. And things have not progressed as you would expect. A lot of resources have gone into making Exeter community wellbeing work.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Bearing in mind that Councillor Pearson has just said he will, and with the help of Sharon and Mark, share 2 documents which will go into more detail. Councillor Moore, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please. Thank you. I think it'd be very helpful to see those documents. That'd be really great. Thank you. Thank you for your reply. With those documents, would you be able to send out details of the new governance system, its membership and accountability within the council to accompany that? And could the portfolio holder explain the basis for the Liverpool Exeter Place Board to provide strategic oversight of the Sport England local delivery pilot? Thank you.
Councillor Pearson?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yes. So yeah, that's fine. I mean, I think you'll see a lot of that basis in those documents. I mean, obviously, what we want is the best and most transparent oversight of this program that we can get, and we want to have the best and most informed people around the table providing that oversight, and that's what we think we've got with that setup. And if you take a look at those documents, I think you'll see that the approach. And if there's any other details in terms of the governance arrangements that Councillor Moore would like, please just email me, let me know, and I'll happily provide those.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson and Councillor Moore. I will ask if Sharon and Mark could include those documents in the minutes. I think that would be very helpful as well, if that's possible. Councillor Moore, could you please move on to question number 4?
Thank you. For some people, the experience of shielding or self-isolation has led to or increased anxiety and frailty. And I know that frailty has been something that the model has been based on. How will this situation change the local delivery pilot priorities and or any approach to delivery?
Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that there's been a lot of learning from, as I've mentioned, putting our resources towards supporting people during coronavirus. But I think that what's really crucial, and I think it's to recognise about the delivery pilot, is that the reason that we're doing this is to target, even before the virus pandemic, was to target groups in that category, people who have those issues of anxiety and frailty, difficulty getting into that first step of physical exercise, perhaps a health issue has caused early frailty. Those kind of things are the focus of the delivery pilot. So I don't think that the approach will change drastically, but there is a lot of learning, having said that, from what we've been doing over the last couple of months.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. The report talks about community-led responses to the pandemic. and the mutual aid groups across Exeter are producing a report of their experiences and the amazing community-led response. Is the council willing, and I'm sure it will be, to receive and consider this report and incorporate any key lessons into its future emergency plans?
Councillor Pearson?
I think we need, I think we need to learn every lesson we can.
Yeah, and I would agree. I'd be happy as chair to see that work. I think it's been really important throughout the pandemic. So, thank you very much for your questions. Okay, we now move to questions from non-committee members, and I have Councillor Kevin Mitchell. Could you ask your first question, please?
Thank you, Chair. Social distancing measures are likely to be in place in the medium to long term as part of the new norm. Has this been factored into the revised likely income from the new St Sibyl's Point Leisure Centre and our other leisure facilities?
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
So no revisions have yet been made to the business case for St Cyril's Point, and the key issues relating to this are set out in the Leisure Services Recovery Plan committee paper that's going to be considered by Executive in July. The only thing I'd add to that, and what I just read is the officer's response, is obviously it's early days in terms of our response to coronavirus and the implications. I think we've all been living with this for a while, but the reality is, in some ways, the implications of this are just starting, and we need to evaluate them.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Pearson. Yes, if I may, taking into account your answer there, and I appreciate it's early days, but will you consider looking at the services we currently offer within our leisure centres and review them to minimise any financial risk that may occur?
Councillor Pearson.
Well, you've just heard what we've been saying about, as of September, we will be running the leisure service in-house, and this is a big change. I'm not going to comment exactly on what those changes are going to be, but obviously there's going to be a big change in the definitely the medium term in terms of what we do in terms of leisure and how we provide it. And I suppose in the context of coronavirus, it's definitely important. What we want to do is provide the best leisure service for the people of Exeter, and we want to provide the services that keep people safe in this context, and we want to make sure that we protect the people of Exeter's money fundamentally in terms of making sure that we don't that we provide an efficient leisure service for people. So all of those factors will be taken into account in a future business case for how we run the leisure service.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mitchell, your second question, please.
Thank you, Chair. Are there any plans to use our parks and open spaces over the summer months to provide exercise classes which would normally be offered within our leisure centres?
Councillor Pearson.
No, there aren't any plans. I think it's so. Obviously, I think it's been really great to see during the pandemic people thinking of innovative ways to keep doing certain activities, whether it's kind of activities over Zoom, bringing classes together in that way, or on other platforms, your platform of choice. But actually, currently, it's really important to note that it's actually outside government guidance to bring together. Really important to note that, because we all feel like we're coming out of this right now, but we are really in a position where we need to make sure we're safe, and that's the most important thing. So we don't want to, there are lots of people doing really great things. We're working with free movement to provide things in our parks. We're doing all sorts of great things, but in terms of bringing those traditional classes back out of leisure centres, we're not making specific plans for that, because what we need to do is make sure we keep people safe, and make sure that people can have can use our parks safely.
Thank you. And do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do. Yes, I very much appreciate the importance of everyone keeping safe. So that's a very valid point that you've made. However, insourcing of our leisure facilities does give us lots of opportunities for joined up thinking in the future, and allowing different services and teams within the council to work together. So could this be looked at in the future so that we have all departments working together to ensure that all our facilities can be used to the optimum level?
Councillor Pearson.
As you can imagine, I am excited about all of the amazing opportunities we have to bring things together in the future and make things brilliant in our leisure service and make it the best. I really believe it will be the best leisure service that Exeter has ever had in the history of us having leisure services. And I'm really looking forward to all of the opportunities to make that happen over the next couple of years. It's going to be really exciting, but also challenging because of the times we're in. And we've got to bear that in mind. You know, it's not going to be easy. We're going to have some difficult decisions, and unfortunately, some of the things that we would normally do over the next few months are going to be tricky.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pearson. Okay, now's an opportunity for any members of the committee to comment. I can see Councillor Lyons first.
Thank you, Chair. You're right. This has only just occurred to me because looking out of my window, I can see the crane still moving above St Sylvia's Point. So my question to Councillor Pearson is, have we had any complaints from any of the people who live locally because of them working earlier and later? That's my first question. And I've got another question when Councillor Pearson has answered that one.
Councillor Pearson.
No complaints have been brought to my attention.
Thank you. My next question is about the golf range. I know it's leased to somebody. Are there any plans that we will take over the lease when it expires? And I appreciate that the golf driving range is very different from the Northbrook golf course. But are there any plans when that lease expires for us to take that over as well?
No, there are no plans. There are no plans at this time to do that, and I think, you know, what we need to be mindful of is, as councillors and as a council, is that we need to be fair to everybody, whether that's the golf driving range, the community, and any other interests that we have to balance. You know, as representatives of the city, we need to be fair and open-minded on what people want and representations from all bodies in terms of the future of anything in the city.
Thank you, Councillor David Henson. You will have to unmute, Councillor. Yeah, we still can't hear you, David. Unfortunately, you're going to have to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Fantastic. Over to you.
Okay, sorry about that, Mr. Chairman. I kept myself very quiet, see. Just on behalf, yes, just would like to raise two questions. One is about Sport England and the local delivery pilot, both for obviously Bomford and also for anybody else who's getting some deal with them. What I was going to ask you is, it does set the topic on behalf of the partners. Now, I've got to listen to the partners. I understand all the partners, but can I just ask, because Cranbrook and Exeter turned up together in the heading just now, Cranbrook's not part of a Devon County County Council promotion as well, is it? We're doing for them or not? We are complete separate individuals away from Cranbrook, aren't we? And my second question is, nice and easy, is any of the money that we're getting from Sport England ring fenced? Because obviously we've all got a few problems with the finance. And I understand everybody's scaling down quite dramatically around the football world and around Sport England. So I'm just wondering what bearing that's going to have on anything that you're thinking about.
Councillor, thank you, Councillor Henson.
Sure. On the the second question of whether the money's the money is for delivering the Sport England delivery pilot, and it's not for anything else in terms of the money that we get from Sport England. The first question, I've somehow managed to forget the first question. Sorry, David. Just give me a hint, and it will all come flooding back.
Sorry, I'm just asking whether Cranbrook are included in Exeter's funding agreement.
Yeah. So we had a joint bid with Cranbrook for the delivery pilot, and it's really about two different things. So Cranbrook being a new community, and then in Exeter we've got areas where of long-term health inequality. So it's those two things together, two kind of sides of a slightly different coin. So work's going on in both. I'm talking to you about the Exeter work. There's work going on in Cranbrook as part of this as well. It's going really well from what I hear. But obviously we're focused on Exeter. But in terms of Sport England, they're doing both.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, can I just come back to you again? Because did you say that the money is ring fenced from Sport England? Some of the money is ring fenced from Sport England, is it?
It is for delivering the work that we've set out in the delivery pilot. So we're not going to use that money to do anything other than things for sporting that contribute towards delivering the Sport England work. And they've been great. Sport England have been fantastic in terms of helping us use some of that resource to help during the pandemic, which has been great, and some of the people that we have. But fundamentally, it is for doing work that helps get our community active. And I think actually, referring actually back to Councillor Moore's previous question, it couldn't be more clear that actually that work is really important in the context of coronavirus, where we've got people who are going to need that going forward in terms of supporting them back into physical activity, having been in lockdown and all these kind of things. So it's really important that we continue with that work.
Totally agree with you on that one. But the trouble is that if they are scaling down, because I mean, for the Football Association, for instance, if we're going to find 25 million a year for grassroots football all over the country, they've got a 75 million deficit. So we're going to find 25 million a year to fill the gap. And I'm just thinking if they're scaling down, then Sport England might scale down. But that's okay. You've answered me. Thank you. All right. And the other one, can I just ask you?
Just through the chair, please, Councillor Henson. It makes it much easier for me.
Sorry?
Just through the chair, please. It makes it easier for me to know what's
sorry. All right, through the chair. So can I just ask just one other question then? In today's paper, Kia obviously have got a few problems, and we've known that for a little while. But today they're talking about their deficit going to be from 65 million to 100 million, and they're cutting more jobs than what they were going to cut. They were cutting 1,200 jobs, and today they're telling us in the stock market that they're going to cut a lot more. What reaction will that have? Obviously, it's going to have a reaction. What sort of reaction that will have to St Sibyl's Point, please, Mr. Chairman?
Councillor Pearson. I mean, you'll see from the report that we're doing everything we can to support Kia in terms of delivering St Sibyl's Point. They've got issues in terms of certain contractors who, literally some of the people that they needed aren't in the country now, and they can't really get back into the country for various reasons. We're paying invoices quicker in order to support them, and we are making sure that they've got all the support they need in terms of the project. But they're a private company. They've got their own issues. What we can do is keep building St Sibyl's Point, keep paying their invoices to try and make sure that they're okay. Yeah, we don't want anything to go wrong with it now. We got here where we are, so I agree with you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Henson. Well, I can't see anybody else who wishes.
Councillor Atkinson, Chair.
Apologies, Councillor Atkinson.
Hello. Apologies accepted. Right, thank you very much, Councillor Pearson, for this excellent report and excellent delivery of your introduction to the report. And I want to congratulate you and the team the City Council on your swiftness afoot in bringing, continue to bring this together, and in particular in the arrangements of bringing back leisure staff in-house, because I think that will be a fantastic opportunity for us to work more agilely and flexibly with our partners, both in Sport England and in the community, because there are lots of community groups out there offering well-being and sports facilities, like several in my area, such as free movement, etc. So I think you are to be congratulated, and I really look forward to it happening and taking place. My specific question is about Riverside, because your report says that that pool should be completed by June. So that's 2021. Sorry, so that is in a year's time. Sorry, I misread that. Not going to be ready yet. Yeah, I've just realised it's 2021 and we're only 2020. So we are still on route for delivering that by 2020, are we? 2021, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said in my report, we've got to take, things are still developing. We've got to take all dates with a little bit of a grain of salt. But on the plus side, that is the program. We've got a program in place that runs to that date. I've seen it. It makes that date possible. There could be other things along the way that derail that, but we have a program in place that should deliver the Riverside by that date. And if it doesn't, that's because something else happened because of coronavirus. That's where we are right now. You see the positive stuff in there. So we've actually completed, during this time, a lot of the difficult work that we were really worried about in terms of the roof and the pool surround has been either completed or surveyed. And I think that's really testament to how that team has worked, and the contractor indeed has worked during that time.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. I think I'm safe to move on.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Questions now to portfolio holder Duncan Wood, who's responsible for support services and procurement. But before that, could I ask Councillor Wood to just very briefly outline what he's already published in his report?
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, before you do so, could I just ask Councillor Henderson, now he has unmuted, if he could mute himself again? Thank you.
Yeah, of course I can.
Okay.
I'll find it.
Shall I carry on, Chair?
Do carry on, Councillor Wood.
Thank you. Of my portfolio, there are two strands which the Scrutiny Committee has drawn out. One is the Finance Directorate Services, and one is the City Solicitors Directorate Services. You've received two briefings on the two different directorates, and I'll summarise them both in turn, and then questions on both at the end, I think is the way that it's going to be played. Is that correct, Chair? It is, thank you. Okay, so looking at both of the services, really, what happens through my portfolio is the sort of thing that doesn't hit Devon Live, it doesn't hit the newspapers, it doesn't hit social media unless we get it wrong. And we haven't got it wrong, and we still don't get it wrong. But if those services aren't there, if they aren't working well, then all the fabulous things that the council did before this pandemic hit, and all the fabulous ways we've responded to the challenges of the pandemic, just wouldn't work. Nothing happens without finance working, and nothing happens in local government or any large body without the legal department doing its job properly, especially in the current climate. So just to briefly go through the highlights of the briefs, I'm assuming you've seen them all, read them all. So just picking out some of the key points, I think around the Finance Directorate, one key element to highlight is that all the services have kept running, nothing ground to a halt, which is crucial. As Councillor Pearson mentioned earlier, paying our invoices on time and keep paying them on time is one of the key ways that we've tried to help the city's economy to keep going, and we will also be helping it to recover, hopefully. So some of the areas which have been hit are internal audit, where some of the people working within internal audit have worked on other projects such as the business rates grants. But they have now targeted the key elements of high risk that has been kept going throughout. That's main accounting, creditor, payroll, and housing benefit. So our internal audit has still been running despite all that's been happening. We have still ensured that we are staying the right side of the line in everything that we do. Looking at the main functions of finance, it's a very heavy workload. It would be a busy part of the year anyway. It's our end of year. For those who've ever been on the Finance and Governance Committee, you will know that we've moved back, or the government has moved back the period in which we have to report. So it's a very tight time frame, the 31st of May. Now they have the government has allowed under this current situation to move that to the 31st of August, but that's still a lot of work to be done. And on top of that, there have been the COVID-19 returns, which is where local authorities have been submitting returns to central government on the impact to the council of the variety of different ways where additional costs have been incurred, income has been lost, and a variety of different impacts. And in financial terms, we've been reporting on those on a regular basis, and that has included a lot of looking at developing assumptions based on the trends that we're seeing, which are very rapidly changing, looking at additional expenditure. I mean, one of the key things that we of course know is the loss in our car park income, which is significant, and that's lost income. You cannot recover it. Once it's gone, it's gone. So those are the things that are going into the COVID-19 returns. I think one of the things that comes out from this when we're doing those COVID-19 returns, it really highlights for us as an authority and for all the other authorities how significant the impact has been. And we're one of the few authorities that has kind of tackled this head on. We have put together an emergency mid-year budget. And those who were able to attend the members' briefing yesterday will have heard some of the changes and mid-year savings that we've needed to make to fill the rather large gap between the money we thought we would have if things had been normal and where we are now. And we're one of the few councils that have taken that head on, and that's based on good financial management, both by directors and portfolio holders, identifying the savings that enable us to still do what we do, but somehow manage to fill those gaps. So I have to thank the directors that work within my portfolio, but also recognise the huge amount of work done by the other directors throughout the council in achieving and identifying those savings. So looking at other impacts, one of them was the payments to suppliers, as we've already talked about. When we did the agile and flexible review of staff, there were different categories of staff. Some could work entirely from home, some could work partially from home, partially out in the field, partially in the office. And there's one element around payments of suppliers where their identification was entirely office-based. Well, obviously that was not something we wished to sustain, although individuals could travel to work where there was no other option when lockdown was at its tightest. We still managed to get those members of staff so they could work from home. So that's within a week of lockdown, we had moved what had been considered essentially office-based roles into being able to work from home. And that included a lot of thinking outside the box. A lot of the posts that arrives, for example, for finance is checks. You think that was nice and simple, but that needs to be entered into the financial system. Somebody need to scan those and send those through. Somebody needed to bank them, cash arrives. There is a lot of things that kind of normally happened that then we needed to find different ways of doing it. And the team has just responded really, really well, as all the teams across the council have. So those are the things that kind of struck me specifically when looking through the brief before I spoke this evening. Looking forward, though, I think the medium term is a real challenge. Whilst we have found the funding to make our budget balance to the end of this year, the impact of this is longer term. We are looking at some significant challenges. Now, we have managed this council very responsibly. We have good financial systems. We have good ways of ensuring we stay within budget. We have made good use of investments of assets. But what we have done in trying to fill this year's budget, we've taken out all the low-hanging fruit. We have made all the savings that were going to help us to overcome the shortfall we were looking at next year. The resources coming into the council are forever being reduced. And next year we were looking at a similar situation, which we were quite prepared to deal with. We will deal with it. But some of the ways we had where we were going to overcome those problems were available, and they've now been used to make our books balance this year. So it's a real uphill climb next year. And the finance team will be working closely with directors to, again, review where all our money goes, where all our money comes from. And we've had all the hard decisions. We're now faced with the very hard decisions. And that's the main thing I see looking forward. So that's the finance directorate. So,
so can I ask you, sorry, because yeah. I'd rather get to the questions because this is a written report. Could you try and be as brief as possible, please?
Okay. Right. I'm obviously going nowhere near reading the reports out themselves, but picking out some key elements then. Thinking about within this second directorate, the HR, human resources, there was some massive changes in the way the organization worked. There were some things that had to shut down. There were some things that had to do more. There were new things that had to be done. A redeployment register was created, and that was then enabled us to make the changes as quickly as we could. Staff being one of our major capacities that needed to be removed and recirculated to make the difference where it was needed. One of the other things that comes out of HR is the job retention scheme. And there is, for the number of staff that we were looking at, a massive amount of work went in with the HR and the various directors, negotiating and identifying job retention scheme posts to be taken on board. There is regular applications that need to be made to retain those job retention scheme posts, but the work is worth it because we're looking at delivering a saving of £400,000 this year. Looking at the democratic services element of this directorate, I think one thing we must all be fairly familiar with is that we held the first virtual formal council meeting in the country. And that was within 2 days of the new legislation allowing it. We were looked at as an exemplar, an effective virtual council meetings. But this took a lot of work from democratic services and from you guys, the councillors, and from officers. And also from Strata, who held our hands throughout. But not resting on our laurels, we started on Skype, we're now on Zoom. And that was the choice to make that change was because Zoom has additional functions and enhanced visual elements. So looking forward, the sheer volume of regulations, guidance and legislation impacting right across all the areas of the council is staggering, and it's ongoing. So recognition needs to be made to the energy, flexibility and tenacity of all staff across the council, but specifically our legal services, who are at the forefront of getting their heads around all of the massive changes, all the restrictions that apply not only to our services, but we're also looked to for advice across all of the sectors. So yes, I take my hat off to them for dealing with such a large quantity of work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wood. And I'm sure the committee will echo your final sentiments there. It's been an interesting few months, and I imagine a very stressful few months for officers and councillors alike. And a lot of work's gone into trying to try and solve as many problems as we can, I suppose. Yeah. So thank you very much. And we'll move straight into questions from committee members. Over to you, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Chair. Question, please, to Councillor Wood. An important piece of work carried out by the Council is ensuring that the maximum number of people are on the electoral register every year. The postponement of the May 2020 elections means that we will have City Council, County Council and Police and Crime Commissioner elections next year. Can you please tell us what work, if any, has had to be postponed due to the pandemic, and what plans are being made for the months ahead to maximise the numbers on the electoral roll? Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Owen. That was a good question. It's an often overused statement at the moment, but these are extraordinary times. Postponement of the 2020 election and resulting implications are no exception. But as this question relates to electoral matters, and we are stringent in ensuring that this function of the Council remains and is seen to remain politically neutral, I will defer this question to John Street to answer.
Very wise. I would suggest John Street, who is with us this evening.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Wood. So in response to the question, although the elections due in May 2020 were postponed, electoral registration work has, I can assure you, continued. Those members of the public who wish to register to vote have continued to be able to do so. The ability for new applicants to register online has continued unhindered. Only those new applicants who wish to register by way of paper application have had a slower response time since some members of the election team have been furloughed. Full staffing will, however, resume from next Monday, the 6th of July. So the answer is the annual canvass will be carried out from the end of this month and will carry on during the autumn, with the intention of publishing a revised register on the 1st of December, as would normally be the case. Having said that, though, we understand that the Cabinet Office have indicated that there may be legislation which allows a delay to the publication of the electoral register until the 1st of February 2021. But plans for the canvass are in hand and on time, and ultimately it would be for the electoral registration officer to decide when the electoral register will be published.
Councillor Owen, do you have a supplementary question?
Yeah, I do, Chair, if I may. Yeah, thank you, John, for that answer. You refer to the annual canvass. By that, do you mean that staff going around knocking on doors of properties where there had been no electoral registration form returned? If so, how is that going to be managed if the pandemic continues?
John Street.
Yes, we do still need to follow the existing procedures for the publication of the register, including the annual canvass. We will say, though, and I always say, that the knocking on doors of those who have not returned the paperwork is the last resort, but we have a legal obligation to do so. I say a last resort because we have at least 3 opportunities for that information to be returned to us via various letters. At the moment, the advice we've been given is to carry on as we would normally do, but obviously we are seeking further advice from the Electoral Commission and the Cabinet Office as to ensure that our staff remain safe at all times in doing that.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Chair.
Again, thank you, John, and thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillor Diana Moore, please, your question.
Thank you. And it's been good to work with fellow councillors in St David's over the period of the lockdown on the community response. Can you tell me a little bit more about the consultation with the union that has been held to enable their input into the safe redesign of working practices? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. And again, I would like to thank you for all the work you put into St David's. It's been an interesting time, but enough about us. And over to Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. The decision was made some time ago to have a full-time Unison secretary paid for by the council, and this has meant that we have had daily contact with Unison, who help both staff and management team in redesign of a safe working practice across the organisation. Unison's involvement has been both invaluable and very welcome. Indeed, Stuart Ward, the Unison secretary, walked the floors of the Civic Centre with officers to ensure we have as safe a working environment as we can, in line with current government guidelines.
Councillor Moore, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. We have discussed in this scrutiny meeting and the one last week about the phenomenal job that the staff have done and they continue to do as we move into a different phase of the pandemic. I'd just like to know a bit about what the council is able to do to support staff wellbeing and also manage the very limited capacity. Last night I received an email from an officer obviously catching up from work late at night, and you know the commitment is amazing, but staff do need space, and I'd just like to know more about the support that staff will get to enable them to have a rest, really, probably.
Councillor Wood.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I know that the different managers manage the agile and flexible process anyway. You have to remember that there was an element of this going on before the pandemic hit. Staff were working from home, and some working patterns are different for different individuals, and that's to benefit them. So, for example, we could have a stretched broadband with two adults working from home. Can an individual actually carry out their work during the evening and overnight, perhaps? Will we be able to accept that? And of course, dependent on their role, we will. We listen to whatever the restrictions that staff are bringing forward are, whatever their problems are. They raise them with their manager, and if required, then obviously advice is sought from HR. But I do know that we take whatever we can, we do whatever we can to be as flexible as possible. But of course, people working from home helps that flexibility. There's all sorts of ways in which having to commute into town, be within the office and come back kind of limits how flexible an individual can be. So we were doing this before the pandemic hit. We're doing it now. Obviously, we're doing it more than we did. But at least we had some practice before we entered this.
I believe, Barn, did you want to just come in on this point?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I was just going to say in relation to that, the strategic management team are very, very conscious of the issues that Councillor Moore raises. And one of the things that we are making sure is that staff have their leave, because we're very conscious that everybody is running and we're tired. And so what we're doing is we're working really hard to make sure that the managers make sure that the staff get leave so that they actually can go away, switch off and recharge their batteries. Now, on top of that, we still have the Employee Assistance Programme, which is a counselling programme. So if anybody needs help, that the council pays for that, so they can dial in and have a session with a counsellor. And we also have the teacup service, which is measuring staff mood. So you can have a daily input that staff say how they're feeling, and that little teacup service just gets them to think about exercise and diet and what they're eating and what they're drinking. And so it is very much in our mind what we're doing with staff and for staff, and we're constantly thinking and reviewing that.
It's very reassuring to hear. Thank you very much. Councillor Moore, do you want to go on to your next question?
Thank you. Before Operation Shield ends, vulnerable people may need some support to make alternative arrangements for safe and timely access to food supplies. What council notification and liaison will there be with charities, registered social landlords and other organisations that might help people to make these alternative arrangements? As I said before, there's a lot of anxiety about, and so I'm concerned about the transition period, really.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Legal services have worked extremely quickly and effectively, analysing a huge range of regulations and legislation and providing advice and support on the interpretation as they apply to the full range of council services. This included the regulations and responsibilities involved in Operation Shield, which is why Operation Shield is mentioned in the brief. However, the operational implementation and service implications fall outside of my portfolio and under the Equalities, Diversity and Communities portfolio under Councillor Amal Hussain. On inquiring into this, I have found or been ensured that the Exeter Community Wellbeing Network will remain in operation to provide support, and that there are lines of information and guidance being developed, which will go on our website and also into social media to provide some information and support. But I would say if you want more information on that, it would be better for you to approach the appropriate portfolio holder. So sorry, I can't help more.
Do you have a supplementary question? Excellent. Could you move on to question number 4?
So the council has administered thousands of pounds of grants over the past couple of months. What identification has been made of businesses that have fallen through the gaps of the various government financial schemes?
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. There've been a range of different grants coming through, as you say. The first was a fairly blunt instrument, and it's become more refined as it's gone on. There are weekly meetings with Exeter Chamber, Exeter FSB and in Exeter, in which discussion takes place on the types of businesses that have fallen through the gaps of financial support that have been made available by central government. In addition, we also receive communications directly from businesses that feel they have fallen through the gap. In developing the Exeter Discretionary Business Grant, Exeter City Council followed national guidelines in developing this grant, which support 4 types of business listed within the national guidelines. So those that fall through the gaps of the original business grants, as some funds remain, a second round of funding will be open to all businesses within Exeter, as long as they meet the mandatory eligibility criteria, which is that they were trading on the 11th of March 2020 and continue to trade, or will continue to trade, need to be classified as a small to medium business, which is based on turnover, aren't eligible for cash grants from any central government COVID-related scheme apart from self-employed income support scheme or coronavirus job retention scheme, and they aren't in administration, insolvent, or have issued striking off notice. And the second round of funding of the Exeter Discretionary Business Grant will support the remaining businesses that haven't received any financial support to date.
Thank you very much. Councillor Moore, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. It would be good to know when this will be becoming available. As we know, there's been problems with, for example, the language schools and not falling within that previous criteria, and also some small hospitality businesses which have struggled because they're not just over the thresholds. So that would be important. And can you just talk about how the needs of these businesses will be reflected in the recovery plan? Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you. Obviously the recovery plan hasn't been finalised, but their input is being captured. There are a number of working focus groups, if you like, subgroups within developing the recovery plan. I'm not actually on the one that would apply to most of the businesses that would fall into this category. I'm looking at, I'm on the subgroup that looks at the city centre. So a lot of kind of retail elements are present in the groups that I attend. So that's the latter part of your question. The first half, you mentioned language schools and I think some small hospitality businesses. And they have been picked up. Those issues are very, officers are very much aware of those issues. I am not aware of the actual resolution of those issues yet. I think it's quite difficult. A lot of this money has come down in a very prescribed way, and it's difficult to step outside those guidelines. But when we do follow the guidelines, it has to be stringent, it has to be consistent, and that's and unfortunately, with the best laid plans, not everybody will necessarily fit the plan, fit the shape, but we do whatever we can to make them fit. But I do know the two instances you've raised, I have heard from staff, and those issues are under consideration.
Thank you. Chair, can I just clarify the first part of my question was, when are they coming on stream? When is this? Is this like next week or 3 weeks or? Don't know.
Can I ask Dave Hodgson to answer that one?
Yes, Dave, over to you, if you can.
Thank you, Chair. The second round of the discretionary business rates is open now. So the first round has recently finished, which was slightly stricter and related to 4 types of businesses as set out by central government. The second round to use up the money that we still have available is now open and should be available for those types of businesses exactly as you've described, that weren't quite eligible for any of the reliefs that have already been introduced. So as long as they've not had any of those other types of relief, then they should be eligible. If they put in an application now, they'll be considered. All the responsibility for potential fraud rests with the local authorities. So we do have quite strict measures to go through, but they're welcome to put in an application now.
Thank you to Councillor Wood and to Dave Hodgson. And could I ask Councillor Moore to move on to your final question, please?
Thank you. Will the emerging Exeter procurement policy set out measures to prioritise local employment by supporting local businesses and social enterprise and contribute to Exeter's 2030 net zero carbon target as part of the city's recovery plan?
Thank you. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Exeter City Council has approved the Devon District Council's procurement strategy and procedures and processes all contracts and work in line with that strategy. The current the current procurement strategy has 4 key themes: contract management, social values, engagement with SMEs and local businesses, and behaving commercially. Of the two of those elements relate to this question, and that is social value and engagement with SMEs and VCSEs. And for those who don't like Scrabble games, that's small and medium enterprises and voluntary and community SEs, social enterprise, yes. The relevant actions set out in the strategy are to include social value and sustainability in all tenders, both with a minimum weighting of 5%, which means that an advantage is given to those suppliers who can demonstrate that they contribute to these twin aims. In advance of developing our own additional elements to the procurement strategy, our contract procedure rules require that the real living wage is paid by all contractors. We are committed to work with our public sector partners through the Devon and Cornwall Procurement Partnership. Exeter University has been successful in securing funding under the heading of partnership and collaboration, part of which is to work with partners such as the RD&E, Devon County Council and Exeter City Council to work together to improve investment in the local economy through targeting our individual and collaborative procurement, and where activity and opportunities for collaboration occur due to similar requirements in the contracts that we seek.
Thank you. Councillor Moore, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. I had understood from the council meeting, which was probably before Christmas, that there was to be a local procurement policy within that strategic context. So thank you for the update. I want to know whether the procurement approach will exclude the procurement of single-use plastic unless it is required for health and safety reasons, for example, for the use of PPE.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you. There is nothing currently in the strategy which prevents that, which precludes that, but that is something I think Councillor Moore and myself and Chanel Busby, our procurement officer, our procurement lead, were due to meet to discuss some of these issues, but I'm afraid the pandemic got in the way a bit. But I think those are very good additions potentially, especially given our motion within the council to stop using single-use plastics. I think it's certainly something we can consider building into contracts. But as you say, we procure so many different services and items, it may not be possible to apply it uniformly across all procurement.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, I would only suggest from the chair that you could have that meeting virtually.
Yes.
And I would move on to questions from, we now have one question, sorry, from a non-committee member, Councillor Michael Mitchell. If you could read out your question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Arising from the likely continuation of restrictions relating to the current pandemic, does the council have the resources to support either 100% postal vote elections or a massive increase in voters requesting postal votes for the 3 elections being held on the same day in May 2021?
Thank you. Now, I'm going to go to Councillor Wood, but I imagine you may be bringing in John Street as you did last time. Over to you.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's about the impact of the pandemic on our electoral processes. So as with the question to Councillor Owen, it's crucial that the electoral services of the council are politically neutral. So I will defer the question to John Street.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Wood. As you would expect, all aspects of next year's elections are currently being looked at by not only the Cabinet Office, but all of us in the electoral profession. So the possibility of all postal vote elections in 2021 is currently being explored. However, legislation would need to be required to enable this to happen. If I may set a little bit more context around the level of postal votes and what that could mean also at the moment. At last year's City Council elections, the City Council issued just under 14,000 postal votes, in fact 13,806. At the preceding European elections, it was even closer to 14,000. So you can see the number of electors already in the city who are requiring a postal vote is somewhere in the region of 14.5% of the electorate. So I think we've got a bit of a table to come up on display as well in a moment. So if demand increased, you could see that a 10% increase would add an additional 1,400 to the postal vote numbers, and would ultimately bring you all the way down to a 200% increase would increase the amount to 28,000, which would be 42,000, which would mean a 44% of the total electorate as it is. However, and having just said that was just about to start on the electoral canvass system, which may in itself bring about some increased demand in the postal votes, it is likely, as we always find, the number of postal votes required suddenly increases as and when an election is called. And this is particularly triggered as and when the postal votes arrive on people's, the poll cards arrive on people's doorsteps approximately 5 to 6 weeks prior to polling day, probably peaking at about 2 to 3 weeks ahead of the polling day itself. We believe that a 10% increase in the numbers we have at the moment would be manageable, but a 50% increase, for example, would have a significant impact. Much would depend, as I've already mentioned, on how the COVID-19 situation develops over the next few months, and an assessment of the prevailing circumstances will need to be made at a national level in sufficient time as to ensure the smooth conduct of the relevant elections. It may also be worthwhile mentioning at this present time that, as the questioner has mentioned, we are due to be having now 3 elections on the same day, the first Thursday in May 2021, with those being the City Council, which were postponed from this year, the already scheduled County Council elections, which would be next year, and the postponed Police and Crime Commissioner elections. So therefore, 3 sets of elections, 3 sets of separate postal votes. 2 sets being on one postal vote, 2 sets being on one particular electoral method, with the Police and Crime Commissioner being on a separate electoral method, being a first and second preference vote. That may mean, and we're currently looking at the possibility, that we might have to do an issue of 2 separate postal votes for those occasions, due to 2 reasons. One being the physical problem of fitting them all into an envelope, and it may well be that Police and Crime Commissioner elections or other elections may well be so important next year that we have a larger increase in candidates than we may have expected in the past, therefore making the ballot papers that much larger. And as I've mentioned already, the different voting systems will be taking place as well. Just to conclude, Chair, if I may, if all postal vote elections were mandated, I think I'd lose even more hair than I've got at the moment, and it certainly wouldn't be any longer grey, it would be all gone. We would need to issue 96,000 postal votes 3 times over for next year's elections. That would be an electoral tsunami, I suggest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Chair. Could I thank John for that full answer? I think the answer is he would need additional resources if that happened. As a follow-up question, what are the financial implications, if any, for the council regarding holding the 3 elections on the same day in 2021? Clearly, we've made some savings by not having elections this year, but what are the implications for next year's budget having 3 on the same day?
I mean, this is for John or Dave, I suppose.
Well, I can come back in to start with, and Dave can assist if need be. There will be an implication for the council because obviously next year we weren't scheduled to be having any elections at all because we don't have elections on county council, our own elections on county council days. But the fact that there are 3 elections on the same day mean that the majority of the costs associated with the elections can be shared. So, for example, as you can see from the budget paper, which is going to the executive next week, there's an anticipated saving this year of approximately £140,000 for the fact that we didn't have elections this year. If we look at holding, that would be the cost of an election across the city. In very rough terms, and don't quote me on the exact mathematics, the very rough terms, the cost implication to the council will be 1/3 of those costs. But obviously, if there are increased printing costs, etc., if we have to go all postal, but there will be a shared element, particularly a very much shared element across the Police and Crime Commissioners, who are funded by the Cabinet Office, and the County Council elections, which will be funded from the County Council. So we would all share the costs for those elections.
Thank you very much, John and Councillor Mitchell. We're now going to open it up for any comments from committee members, and I saw Councillor Moore.
No, I was waving at my husband out the window. Sorry.
Oh, apologies. That's the beauty of the new normal. We can all get things confused. Thank you very much, and hello to your husband. Any comments from committee members? Councillor Owen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a follow-on question, really, to John Street on his answer there to Councillor Mitchell's question. John mentioned one problem with the 3 elections next year would be fitting all the ballot papers in an envelope. I just wonder whether the government might consider allowing the local authorities to use bigger envelopes to deal with this particular problem. Oops. Did you hear me?
As I said, yes, I did. Sorry, yes.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry.
As I said at the beginning of my answer to the second question, the Cabinet Office and government are looking at all possibilities at the moment to ensure that the elections due next year are carried out as smoothly and efficiently as possible. So we will be looking at everything alongside the Electoral Administration, Association of Electoral Administrators and the Electoral Commission to ensure that all those matters are taken into account.
Yeah, thank you, John. The question was rather tongue-in-cheek. I appreciate your answer.
You would be surprised, though, that we are legislatively required to have certain size envelopes and certain size, well, not envelopes, but certain size print, even on the the postal vote information that goes out. So we are very much bound by legislation and very much what we do.
Yeah, appreciate that, John. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I can't see anybody else wishing to speak.
Chair,
Brilliant.
I did see a comment come up earlier from Councillor Atkinson, I think, regarding do we have enough ballot boxes?
I'm not sure that was a question. I'm guessing because Councillor Atkinson didn't weigh that was slightly tongue-in-cheek.
The answer is yes.
Brilliant. Thank you. That actually concludes tonight's agenda. So I would like to thank all the portfolio holders, members who've asked questions, and officers for all their support. I'm sure you'll agree we've had a full and proper debate about lots of issues tonight. And if I just remind councillors, we've only had 2 portfolio holders here. So just the sheer amount of work that's gone into those 2 briefs, we've managed to have a meeting that's over 90 minutes, which is really good. For members of the public, there's an opportunity in this committee to ask questions to portfolio holders next time. It'd be nice to see that facility used. And we'll be meeting again as a Strategic Scrutiny Committee on Thursday, the 23rd of July at 5:30, again virtually. So thanks to all councillors and thanks for everyone's contributions. We'll see you on the 23rd of July.